I'd like to call the village board meeting to order for Tuesday, June 23rd, 2026. Roll call, please.
Trustee Service.
Here.
Trustee Paul.
Here.
Trustee Zerbal.
Here.
Trustee Atkinson.
Here.
Trustee Krieger.
Here.
Trustee Telford. And President Kardasky.
Here, please stand for the pledge. And please remember our men and women throughout the world in uniform. I have no changes to the agenda. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. Number 5, comments from the public. During the public comment period and pursuant to Wisconsin statute, section 19.84, parent 2, individuals must state their name and address. Comments are limited to items not on the agenda. Comments are limited to 5 minutes. Personnel issues cannot be discussed nor individuals named. The board's role is to listen and receive information from the public, and the board is not able to take action at this meeting. Is there anybody who would like to say anything? Items not on the agenda. State your name and address for the record, please.
I'm Rick Van Lannen, 2673 Pioneer Drive. I'm also the Brown County Board Supervisor for District 22, which includes wards 9 through 12 in Ashwaubenon and wards 1 through 4 and 6 in the town of Lawrence. Just a few things that I have. I wanted to congratulate Keith Lucius, Assistant Superintendent of the Ashwaubenon School District, received the Wisconsin Association of School Business Officials 2026 Wallace E. Zastro Lifetime Achievement Award, and he's going to be retiring soon, so I want to congratulate him on his years of service and not only giving back to the school district of Ashwaubenon, but the community and the residents in Ashwaubenon. And then in honor of him, Caitlin Vandenbush of the Ashwaubenon School District received the 2026 Zastro Scholarship in honor of Keith Lucius's award. So Saturday, July 18th is the Brown County Library in Ashwaubenon location, the grand opening. County provided some money towards that, so looking forward to that finally opening up. Mike Reed will start as the interim director of the Neville Museum effective June 29th. Also, a task force was formed to discuss various options on the future of the museum, so there'll be more to come on that issue. And then recently, the 911 Commission was formed to review the investigation report and consulting report. I read those reports. I found those quite disturbing, but I'm also confident that the commission and management and staff will come together, because I think they all realize that public safety is of utmost importance, and there's some hurdles to cover, but I think they'll come through and get this ship turned around and headed in the right direction. And like I said, it's very important that they do that. There'll be more to come on that. And then last month, County Supervisor Zeke and I spoke with the board regarding looking at parks or what have you for the county, what we might be able to do. We're still reaching out to the Parks Director, and we've got some things in the works. No promises there, but we are working on it, and we've got some ideas, and there should be more to come on that also. And then finally, I would like to say Happy 4th of July to everybody, and 250-year anniversary coming up, and thank you for all you do and all those folks, so what they do. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam President.
I'm Zeke Probilski. I live at 2455 Bay Area Place. I'm the district supervisor for Ashwaubenon, wards 1 through 8. Earlier this month, I served on the Planning, Development, Transportation Committee. We had a meeting which we had an overflow crowd on the same day that you guys had it here. You're welcome, Joel, that we had all the individuals at our meeting and not yours. So we had about 30 people speak, and we went over our statutes that the county does not have the ability to direct municipalities on what they can or cannot do when it comes to AI centers. We did form an informal 3 supervisory committee to go on and talk to all the municipalities and get their opinions as to what's going on with these data centers. Then on June 6th, I had the honor of representing Ashwaubenon and Brown County at the Change of Command ceremony for the 432nd Civil Affairs Battalion, the Armed Reserve Center, just located down here on Holmgren Way. We had it at the Heritage Hill State Park, where we met in the courtyard of the replica of Fort Howard, which if my research tells me correctly, is the first formal military establishment here in the Green Bay area, which is really kind of neat. And also we had Rick and I and a couple other supervisors went out Sunday night to welcome in the veterans off the honor flight at Straubel Field. Very rewarding. We're guessing somewhere around 400 or 500 people attended. It was just a fantastic time to welcome all those veterans and their chaperones in off that honor flight. So thank you very much for your time, Madam President.
Okay, is there anybody else who would like to say anything about items not on tonight's agenda? State your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, my name is Rachel Bardsworth.
Could you hit yep, thank you, it turned green.
Sorry, my first time. Good evening, my name is Rachel Burnsworth. I own a business at 1375 North Road.
Okay,
I am a Wisconsin licensed massage therapist, the owner of Bodywork Solutions LLC, and co-founder of the Second Mountain Project here in Ashwaubenon. I want to begin by saying that I support efforts to combat human trafficking and other illegitimate businesses. I understand that the village has a responsibility to protect the public, and I appreciate the work that goes into that responsibility. However, I would like to ask the board to take a closer look at how massage therapy businesses are being classified and regulated under the new Massage Establishment Ordinance. For context, I have been a licensed massage therapist for more than 18 years. Massage therapists in Wisconsin are already regulated by the state. We undergo criminal background checks, we maintain continuing education requirements, and are subject to professional discipline through the state licensing process. Our facility is not what most people would think as a traditional massage establishment. We operate a multidisciplinary wellness center. In our shared space, we have licensed massage therapists with decades of experience, a licensed mental health therapist, a fitness facility, and other wellness services. Our mission is to help people improve their physical, mental, and emotional health. One question I would ask the board to consider is whether facilities like ours are being appropriately classified. Is a multidisciplinary wellness center truly the same thing as a massage establishment for regulatory purposes? And if so, why? Many of us who practice massage therapy are healthcare and wellness professionals serving our community. We support reasonable oversight. We also want to ensure that regulations are fair, evidence-based, and reflective of the realities of a modern healthcare and wellness practice. I would respectfully ask the board to consider whether multidisciplinary wellness facilities like ours are being classified in a way that accurately reflects what they are and the role they serve within our community. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Alan Burnsworth, also at 1375 North Road. My name is Alan Burnsworth. I'm Rachel's very lucky husband and co-owner of the Second Mountain Project. I wanted to briefly share why we created this center. The Second Mountain Project was never intended to be simply be a business. We created it because every day we meet people carrying burdens that are not visible from the outside. Stress, anxiety, grief, physical pain, health challenges, relationship struggles, the demands of work, family, and everyday life. Many of the people who walk through our doors are doing their best just to hold everything together while fighting battles that most of us never see. Our belief is that health is bigger than one profession. Sometimes a person needs counseling, sometimes they need body work, sometimes they need help improving their strength, recovery, resilience, or overall well-being. Often, they need a combination of those things. That is why we created the Second Mountain Project. We wanted to bring together professionals from different disciplines who share a common purpose, helping people improve their quality of life and become healthier, stronger, and more resilient. We are not asking for special treatment. We are simply asking the village to consider whether integrated health and wellness facilities like ours are being classified in a way that accurately reflects what they are and the role that they serve in our community. Thank you for your time and service and consideration.
Thank you. Okay. Any other comments from the public on items not on tonight's agenda? Any items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, moving on. Number 6, written communications or announcements. I have none. Does anybody have anything? Nope. Okay. Number 7, presentations, 2025 fiscal year audit and annual comprehensive financial report. Greg Wenholz. This was really
Best time of the year.
invigorating reading.
That's right. So Justin Hoagland from our contracted auditor, Baker Tilly, is here to go through the 2025 audit. Just a quick backdrop. That process starts in November, end of the year, where we start doing preliminary audit work, carries into the year as we prepare for the final audit, which takes place towards the end of February. And then from February through May, there's a lot of back and forth, follow-up and continuation, goes into reporting and leads us to where we are today. So Justin's going to go through some, you have in your packet a document called the financial highlights. There's also some other documents in there, including the 2 packets that I handed out to you today. Those are also all available on our website. But Justin will be going through the audit highlights and can help answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg said, I'm Justin Hoagland. I'm a principal at Baker Tilly, and I oversee the village's financial audit. We do have a separate team that does your utility audit, but I'll also speak on those funds as well tonight. And so we did issue your 2025 reports a couple weeks ago, and so per usual, we like to come briefly go over those reports, some of the financial highlights, like Greg said, and then see if you have any questions for me. But first, did want to thank Greg and his team. Per usual, the audit ran very smoothly. And we only have a couple audit entries each year, if none. It is truly outstanding, especially for how much really the village has going on. I would say, I audit 30 plus municipalities a year. On average, we probably have 15 to 20 audit entries, things we come in and have to fix, right? And so really why that's important for the village is, those monthly budget to actual reports that you get, you can really rely on those, that information as accurate, right? Unfortunately, we have some clients where we go and make 50 audit entries that can you really rely on those if you have to wait till the audit to have those entries. So again, something thankfully the village doesn't have to worry about. And so I know Greg said you had these, a couple of the reports that we issue that I wanted to go over really briefly here is the first is this reporting and insights from the 2025 audit. So this document has a lot of different required communication that we need to give those charged with governance. It has things such as if we have any internal control issues that we noted during the audit. They're the only item we have. It sounds bad. We have what's called a material weakness over financial reporting. That's just because we prepare your financial statements, right? We prepare the financial statements for probably 90 to 95% of our clients. It's really only those very large municipalities, the very large counties that have the resources, the people, and the time to complete it themselves. So again, that's the only reason we have that. We don't have any points around segregation of duties or anything like that. A lot of the communities we go to have segregation of duties issues, right? Where maybe one person can do too much, so we have to point those out. That is not the case here. So really the village does have very good controls in place. Another page I always like to point out in this document is, it's page 11. It's titled Audit Committee Resources. You'll see a link to a Baker Tilly website at the top there. So we do, again, have a website that we always try to keep up to date with trending topics, regulatory updates that specifically impact the governmental industry. So feel free to go out there and peruse that. And then you also find my contact information here on page 19 and the rest of the audit team. If you ever do need to get a hold of us, feel free to reach out. That's this document. For the financial statements themselves, one item I always like to point out is our opinion on your financial statements. So we do issue what's called a unmodified or a clean opinion on your financials. It's the highest level of assurance that we can offer, essentially attesting to the fact that your financial statements are free of any material errors or misstatements, right? Again, similar to what you've received in the past. So all good on that front. And then the other document I wanted to go over looks like this. It's the financial highlights document, right? Got all the fun graphs and everything in it. So looking at page 1 of that document, has the bar chart at the top. So, whenever I'm assessing the financial health of a municipality, I always like to look at the general fund. Right? This is your main operating fund where a lot of your day-to-day transactions run through. And specifically, we like to look at your fund balance or your equity, right? How much is there? What is it classified as? You'll see that you have 4 different types of fund balance listed. At the way bottom here, you have non-spendable fund balance. It's $22,000, very small. It consists of inventory and prepaids, essentially because it's not in spendable form, right? You've already spent the money on the inventory or the prepaids. You have $145,000 as restricted fund balance. That's mostly grant related, right? Where you've got money in for a specific thing that you have to spend it on, so it's restricted externally. And then you have some committed fund balance. Again, that the board has formally committed for retirements, that $350,000 there. And then kind of what's left over is that unassigned fund balance at the top here, the 5.7 million. Again, that doesn't have any sort of restrictions on it. It can be spent or not spent at the village's discretion. Below that chart here, we have a very high level of summarized income statement for the general fund. Again, showing a budget to actual. So you can see here that your final budget, you budgeted to use up essentially $252,000 of your fund balance. However, you actually had a net income of $195,000 in the general fund. So again, did better than budget in 2025 for the general fund. You'll see that revenues were about $1.67 million better than budget. So the 2 main drivers of that, first is your investment income, was about $494,000 better than budget. We see that this at almost every municipality over the last 3 or so years, right? We're in a high interest rate environment, overall positive market conditions. A lot of municipalities aren't just bumping up that budget just in case interest rates drop and then you're in trouble, right? So we see that a lot. Again, that's $494,000 over budget. The other one was there's a $972,000 transfer in from the TIF 4 closure. So when TIF closes, any access fund, a portion goes to the village, the rest goes to the other overlying taxing jurisdictions. So that's another reason for that. You'll see expenditures on here were actually worse than budget. But again, a big reason of that is that TIF transfer. So the money was transferred from the TIF to the general fund and then out of the general fund to the Public Works Vehicle Replacement Fund to be used there. But that shows up as an expenditure in that number. That, again, wasn't budgeted for, so that's why it looks like that. But again, overall, $195,000 net income in the general fund, again, better than what was budgeted. So the next page, again, focuses around the general fund and that unassigned fund balance that we just talked about. So one thing we always like to do is we take that unassigned fund balance, divide it by your subsequent year budget, and essentially it says, if you don't take in any more revenues, right, how long can you kind of keep the lights on, keep paying your bills just on that unassigned fund balance that you have? And so that calculated out to about 26%. at the end of 2025, or about 3 months of, it's kind of like a cash on hand type calculation, although there's more details to it. But so you'll see, again, the village here is that in orange. The blue dots are other municipalities your size in Wisconsin and where they sit, and so they are a little bit higher on average than Ashwaubenon. You do have a minimum unassigned fund balance policy that essentially says you want that ratio to be at least 20%, which it has been each of the last 5 years. So the next page, another area we always like to look at is your debt. And so the village can take out up to 5% of your equalized value in general obligation debt, right? That's a statutory limit. And so that's that black line there, your maximum amount of debt that you can have outstanding. The orange line is how much GEO debt you actually had outstanding at the end of each year. So essentially at the end of 2025, you've used up about 27% of that debt limit. That's, I would say, right about average. I would say the average is right around 30% for other municipalities in Wisconsin. And certainly shows that you do have capacity to borrow if you do need to for future capital projects. The next page, again, focuses around debt, and another ratio we like to calculate is figuring out, of your normal routine expenditures, what percent of those have to go to cover that debt service, right? Principal and interest payments. So if you're using it on debt service, you can't use it to buy a new public works truck, right? So again, the village is in orange here. You can see at the end of 2025, you used about 25% of your normal routine expenditures went to cover debt service. That is just slightly above, again, those black dots are other municipalities your size in Wisconsin on average. But again, it's slightly above. It's certainly not a concern to be at that 25% level. So next I want to talk about your 3 utilities here. So the first is your water utility on page 5 here. At the top, we show your operating results, right? Comparing your operating revenues to your operating expenses. We usually like to see that there's a decent gap between your operating revenues in blue and your operating expenses in black. However, here you can see that they're very, very close, and if not, operating expenses are exceeding operating revenues. These are all funds that should be self-sustainable, right? They should be able to get those user rates should be enough to cover its expenses. And that is not the case, and it's been, again, very close the last 3 years. So certainly whenever we see that, we highly recommend that you look at your rates. You need to have a rate study done, because if your operating expenses are higher than your operating revenues for a considerable period of time, you're going to run out of money, right? It's not sustainable. And so under this graph, we have your unrestricted reserves. This is kind of calculating, again, your months of cash on hand. So at the end of 2025, you had 5.28 months of cash on hand. We always like to see at least 3 months, so you are above that. However, you'll see there the last 4 years, it's been ticking down more and more. Under that, we have your investment in capital. So again, these are very capital-intensive funds, right? You have all the meters, the infrastructure, the pipes, and so we always like to see, of those capital assets, how much still has essentially debt attached to it, and how much is in equity or paid off. And so we usually like to see at least 50% equity, and you do have 96% equity, so you only have 4% debt. So at least you do have very limited debt within the water utility fund. The next page, again, set up very similarly here, is for the sewer utility. Again, you'll see operating expenses have consistently been above your operating revenues. Your months of cash on hand are below that minimum amount that we like to see. You're at 1.63 months of cash on hand. Again, thankfully, you have no debt in that fund, but again, the current kind of trajectory of this fund is not sustainable. So again, highly recommend that you look at rates. And then lastly is your stormwater utility. Again, this one actually had, the operating revenues above operating expenses like we would like to see. 32 months of cash on hand, so very high in that fund. And 30% of that investment in capital is connected to debt. So really overall, the general fund had a good year, but something to look at is definitely your utility funds, and those rates that are being charged. Any questions for me?
When I'm looking at that operating results for the stormwater on year 2025, is that showing the $1,982,006 regardless? Why is that so high?
Looking to see if.
Or what, I should say, why did it?
Gary,
Yeah, I don't know if Greg can
so
answer, 'cause I
for
don't do
all
that.
of the utilities, you should remember that we've had the presentations from Green Bay Water and Blue Water about their rising capital costs to us. And we have been addressing the rate issues, and we continue to do that, to the tune, they're going up in their cost to us anywhere from 8 to 10% a year. So we've been addressing that. The stormwater, we did have a rate increase for 2025. We have a lot of pond and other projects on the horizon. So that's why those costs for 2025 didn't maybe come in right away, but they will. That'll catch up. So we had a rate increase in 2025. That's why that revenue went up to address oncoming.
Yeah, I remember them coming in here and whining about it.
Yeah, so the water and sewer, we're well aware of the cost increases. Those are not our those are the charges that are coming directly from the Green Bay Water Utility and the sewer district, not our other day-to-day operational costs. Those are relatively flat. It's specifically those two bills that we get every year. Those are increasing rapidly. And each of those make up 70, 75% of the budget. They're a huge portion.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have any more questions? Or do we need a motion or just information? Or a motion, yeah, discussion only, okay. There's no further questions. Thank you very much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, number 8, public hearings. A, public hearing on ordinance 04-5-26, revised second amendment to the planned unit development PUD overlay zoning for West Point Center at 460 Marina Lane, parcels VA-132-16, VA-132-13, and VA-132-15. Aaron.
All right, thank you. I'll give a brief overview of the project for the public hearing. Just bring up a couple images here as well, just for reference purposes. So the request, if you remember, at the April village board meeting, there was quite a bit of discussion regarding the proposed CBRF assisted living and the RCAC senior housing, senior apartments. At that point, the direction was given to staff and to the developer to kind of regroup, take into account what they heard at the village board meeting and prepare maybe an alternative. What they did was they did go back to the drawing board and brought forth this proposal, which I'll just run through briefly. What you see here, this is the area where the CBRF assisted living was. That's now identified as green space, basically just stored for future use. And the senior apartments are now strictly 55 plus without a supportive designation. So there's no more RCAC designation with those senior apartments. So that was the major change from the original Second Amendment PUD. The applicants are in the audience. If you have any questions for them at time of the action item.
Okay, this is a public hearing on this ordinance. Does anybody that want to speak for or against this at the public hearing? Anybody like to speak for or against this? Okay, hearing none, I need a motion to close the hearing.
So moved.
Second?
Motion and a second to close the hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 8B, public hearing on ordinance 06-01-26, creating chapter 17, planning and zoning, article 10, hyperscale data center moratorium. Joel.
Yeah, I'll just provide a brief introduction, and then public hearing is to be held tonight. In regards to an amendment, a text amendment to Chapter 17 of the Planning and Zoning Code of the Village of Ashwaubenon. Essentially what this is doing is creating Article 10, enacting a temporary moratorium on what is defined as hyperscale data centers in the Village of Ashwaubenon. Again, this is temporary. It is a 12-month moratorium establishing a moratorium on the development of hyperscale data centers, essentially defined as any data center that exceeds 100,000 square feet in total building footprint and the usage of 20 megawatts of power for that particular facility. And again, I'll cover a little bit more detail during the action item for the ordinance. This particular notice was published in the Press Times under a Class 2 notice and is required to have a public hearing before action by the village board.
Okay, is there anybody who would like to speak for or against this ordinance? Anybody who would like to speak for or against this ordinance? Hearing none, I need a motion to close the hearing.
I'll move.
Second?
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Number 9, action on consent agenda. A, consider, discuss, act on the open and closed session minutes of the May 26, 2026 village board meeting. B, consider, discuss, act on the 2026-2027 renewal retail alcohol licenses. C, receive and accept the May 2026 village fund financial reports. D, receive and accept the May 2026 investment report. E, consider, discuss, act on Class B beer license application renewal for Creative Edge Media, LLC, DBA Edge VR Arcade. F, receive and accept the June 2026 Parks, Rec, and Forestry Department reports. G, receive and accept the June 2026 Public Works Department reports. H, consider, discuss, act on the budgeted expenditures for periods between 5/20/26 to 6/17/2026. I, consider, discuss, act on a release and termination of collateral assignment of development agreement with Merge LLC and Covantage Credit Union for the Common Place 2 at 670 Mike McCarthy Way, parcel VA-55. J, amended item, consider, discuss, act on a collateral assignment of development agreement with Common Place on Mike McCarthy Way LLC, Mike McCarthy Way 2 LLC and Fortify Bank for the Common Place 2 at 670 Mike McCarthy Way, parcel VA-55. K, consider, discuss, act on the assignment and assumption of the tax increment financing agreement with Common Place on Mike McCarthy Way 2 LLC for the Common Place 2 at 670 Mike McCarthy Way, parcel VA-55. L, consider, discuss, act on village financial policies. M, consider, discuss, act on the Green Bay Packers 5K Fun Run Walk Special Event Road Closure. N, consider, discuss, act on the appointment of Joseph Richter to serve on the Park and Recreation Board. O, amended item, consider, discuss, act on temporary premise extension for Green Bay Moose Lodge 801. Okay, anybody want a motion to accept or pull anything for discussion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve consent agenda. I would like to, when we vote on this, I would like to abstain on item number O, but I will be voting for the rest of it. So, okay, everybody understand the motion?
So moved.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Okay, that consent agenda is done. 10, ordinances and/or resolutions. 10A, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 04-5-26, creating a revised second amendment to the planned unit development PUD overlay zoning for West Point Center at 460 Marina Lane, parcels VA-132-16, VA-132-13, and VA-132-15. Aaron.
All right, as discussed, I will just share my screen again, just for reference. So again, this is the revised PUD amendment based upon village board direction from the April meeting. There was the proposed resubmittal as identified. The PUD ordinance does identify this site plan, specifically including the green space and the senior apartments without an RCAC designation. So if there are any changes proposed in the future, it would have to come back to village board again, following site plan review committee and plan commission for final approval. Site plan review committee and plan commission did recommend approval of the proposed PUD amendment. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, the applicants are in the audience as well.
Aaron, you did state that the green space would come back through the channels.
That's correct. Any changes to the green space would have to come back through site plan, plan commission, and village board.
Okay, thank you.
So I know we've been over this a number of times, and I thank the development group for listening to us and what our concerns were. I think it's a great job. I think it's good to move forward, so I will make the motion to approve ordinance 04-5-26, revive second amendment to the Plan Unit Development Overlay Zone for West Point Center, 460 Marina Lane, parcels VA-132-16, VA-132-13, and VA-132-15 with staff conditions.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 04-5-26 with staff conditions. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10B, consider, discuss, act on a proposed ordinance 06-01-26, creating Chapter 17 Planning and Zoning, Article 10, Hyperscale Data Center Moratorium. Joel.
Thank you, Madam President. As noted in the staff report, the village currently does not have specific zoning or regulatory language addressing what we'll define as a hyperscale data center. As everyone on the board is aware, interest in these types of facilities continues to grow and prepare or raise concerns amongst residents, not only in our community, but throughout the region and the state. Back in April of 2026, a conversation was had at the Planning Commission about the regulation of zoning for hyperscale data centers in the village. As many of you know, in 2025, we adopted or implemented the first year of an updated comprehensive plan. And one of the key aspects of that updated comprehensive plan is the rewriting of our zoning code to align with that recently adopted plan. Because we are going through that process of updating our zoning code, we felt it would be appropriate to address the questions and concerns related to data centers. However, we also recognize that if we were to address that issue amongst all the many other issues that zoning codes address, like minimum lot sizes, setbacks, accessory structures, accessory dwelling units, the important conversations related to all of those other elements would be really kind of diluted on the conversation and concerns related to data centers. And so the concept was born that if we create a temporary moratorium to set aside the conversation on hypercenter data centers, it will allow us to address the remainder of the zoning code over the next few weeks, if not months, as that gets worked through by both Planning Commission and Village Board. It should note that this proposed ordinance just addresses a moratorium for hyperscale data centers. So again, it's the large-scale operations that exceed 100,000 square feet of floor space and generally require a significant electrical capacity of more than 20 megawatts for that facility. Small to medium enterprise data centers exist today in the village of Ashwaubenon. So I want to make it clear that data centers or data processing and storage facilities are a permitted use in the village. There are industries in our community, some very large industries, that have enterprise data centers that currently operate. This particular moratorium would not create a non-conforming use. It's a double negative, I apologize for that. It doesn't create a non-conforming use for those existing data centers. And those data centers support operations like major logistic companies, healthcare industries, and financial institutions. What this ultimately does is it sets that moratorium for that size and power watt usage, again, to set it aside for 12 months. We can tackle the vast majority of our zoning code without concern or worry about the data center conversation. And then we can have conversations very specific to hyperscale data centers in preparation of that code. And so we were, again, able to set that aside, make that process extremely transparent and engaging for our community to provide feedback as to what their concerns are and what regulations are necessary to maintain the health, safety, and welfare of the community. As noted in the Plan Commission meeting, to be clear, the village has not been approached by a data center. This is not a reaction to any proposed data centers or potential development. It ultimately is, again, it's really strategic about how we're handling our zoning code. So to ensure that we're maintaining that transparency related to data centers, but yet still able to tackle the remainder of that code. It has been talked about in the past, the village is relatively landlocked, so hyperscale data centers, those that you're seeing in Beaver Dam or Mount Pleasant or in Port Washington, are generally a little bit too large for the amount of land area that we have. However, there are tracts of land in the village that could support what would be clearly defined as a hyperscale data center, anything over 100,000 square feet. So again, I don't know that the threat, if you will, if you want to call it that, for data centers is legitimate for Ashwaubenon, but this would ultimately create that protection in place so that over the next 12 months, you can thoughtfully craft a code that would appropriately regulate it. Again, in the coming weeks, Aaron and his staff are going to be presenting to Planning Commission a zoning code rewrite. That zoning code rewrite will have this moratorium in place, but it'll tackle all those other issues. And then we will come back and address the data center questions separately from the remainder of that zoning code. This went through Planning Commission, received unanimous recommendation, and so it's now before the board for consideration tonight.
Yeah, and I think that this is definitely the right approach because really want Aaron and staff and that to be focused because it's been quite a while since we've rewritten these ordinances. We have a lot of things that have changed within Ashwaubenon that we need to be focused on, and we don't want it to get lost in this one issue. So I think this is a very appropriate way to be able to do that, to be able to just kind of put this on hold, put it off to the side, deal with everything else. You've seen a lot of communities around us, things with setbacks and lot sizes are all being changed, all things are different. Those are all things that we need to find out in Ashwaubenon. What is it that our future, in which direction that we're going, especially being so landlocked, we have to be very careful with our resources. So I think, and I know at the Planning Committee, we talked about this, and it definitely is an appropriate direction to just freeze this right now. That's the way I look at it. It's just a freeze right now, and let's get the other things taken care of. I also know that there is some discussion at the state level of different things that are going on that might impact the way an ordinance would even be written around a hyperscale data center. So that's my feedback. So I'll make the motion to adopt ordinance 06-1-26, creating Article 10 of Chapter 17, Planning and Zoning, Hyperscale Data Center Moratorium.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to adopt ordinance 06-01-26. Any other comments, discussion,
That
concern?
one, this is good for a year, right, Joel?
Correct. So this is a
What's
temporary
I just
moratorium.
wanted just a quick one. What's going to happen after a year?
Well, hopefully in that next 12-month period, we'll have time to draft the appropriate regulations where or how these types of facilities may or may not be permitted in the village. So our goal is to have that specific portion of the zoning code crafted and presented and implemented and adopted by the village board by that 12-month.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10C, consider, discuss, act on resolution R6-1-26, accepting the donation of a bandshell at Klipstine Park. Joel, before I let you have this, though, I have to say, several of you were at the bandshell dedication ribbon cutting last week, And we have a beautiful bandshell in Klipstine Park that was wanted for many, many years. And 3 families came together and made it happen. So very thankful. And if you can't get out to a concert, at least drive by and look at it because it is really incredible. So anyway, okay, Joel, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. On that note, if you were at the ground, or the ribbon cutting, and the microphone wasn't working correctly, that's not the new Bandshell's audio system. That's our old audio system.
That
So
is
Jerry-
great. Yeah, I was not happy with what was going on, and I had my hearing aids.
Well, Ken
wide
wanted to
open.
make sure that was clear, that that was not part of the donation. So this is really more of an administrative act. As you know, we received a generous donation of in the tune of about $300,000 of a donated bandshell at Klipstine Park. This was donated privately and ran through the Green Bay Community Foundation. They have completed that project, closed out the expense account with the foundation. This resolution is simply accepts that donation and allows us to take on the asset, if you will, and insure it and basically make it our own.
Okay, anybody want to make a motion to accept that?
I'll make a motion to consider discuss act on resolution R 6-1-26, accepting the donation for the van shelter at Klipstine Park.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second to adopt Resolution R 6-1-26. Any other comments, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. 10D, consider, discuss, act on Resolution R 6-2-26, urging the state of Wisconsin to redesignate Census Tract 5500902130 for Opportunity Zone 2.0. Aaron?
All right, thank you. I'll just share my screen to provide a reference for where the Opportunity Zone currently is located in the village, and also then where it could be located, provided the redesignation is authorized. So what you see up on screen in that, it should be yellow shaded area, that's roughly bounded by the Fox River, Ashwaubenon Creek, I-41, Cormier Road, and South Oneida Street going back up to Lombardy Avenue. That is the census tract that is designated by the census as was considered a low-income census tract for purposes of the Opportunity Zone program. Within Brown County, this is the only potential opportunity zone located outside of the city of Green Bay. We do have this area currently designated as an opportunity zone. It was put in place about 9-10 years ago through a nomination process that went from basically the governor's office to the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Within an opportunity zone, there are certain incentives for financial investors into development projects. They get certain tax benefits, federal income tax benefits for investing in projects in these areas. So the intent is really to generate financial development, economic development projects in these more challenging census tracts. The original designation does expire at the end of this year, and as a result of some federal legislation, they passed what's called the Opportunity Zone 2.0. Opportunity Zone 2.0 does have more restrictive requirements in terms of the number of opportunity zones that can be designated by a state and authorized by the U.S. Department of the Treasury. So it is a competitive process. I'll be starting the application tomorrow following action tonight should the resolution be passed. The request for the resolution really is meant to put our best foot forward as a community to demonstrate our support for redevelopment, our continued redevelopment within this opportunity zone moving forward over the next 10 years. If you have any questions specific to the Opportunity Zone program, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah, the opportunity zones really are a wonderful tool for redevelopment for some blighted areas. So hopefully we will get this designation because it does help a lot of investors. So.
A couple of projects just for reference. The Commonplace One was an Opportunity Zone project. The Berkshire was an Opportunity Zone project. And there's a number of other smaller ones, but those are the two large ones.
So then the developers get a little bit of a break on the tax side of this then? Is that really the way it works underlying?
Correct. Yeah. What I'm told from different developers is that it doesn't make a bad project good. It makes a good project better.
Gotcha.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution R6-2-26, urging the state of Wisconsin to redesignate Census Tract 55009021-303 for Opportunity Zone 2.0.
We have a motion and a second to accept Resolution R 6-2-26. Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. 11, other items of business. 11A, consider, discuss, act on a site plan review request for exterior improvements to 780 Morris Avenue, parcel VA-66-7-E-1. Aaron.
All right, I'll share my screen again just to provide an image of the proposed improvements to the project. The reason this site plan comes to the village board is because it is located within the sports entertainment district. And under our code, any site plan review requests within the sports entertainment district or the village center district do have to come to village board following site plan review committee and plan commission for approval. This is the former Koken small engine or rental location at Morris Avenue. It has been purchased by a different entity. They are proposing the improvements as depicted on this rendering. The building itself is going to stay, but they're going to replace the exterior cladding, roof, asphalt, so on and so forth. In terms of recommended conditions of approval, use of fully concealed fasteners for exterior wall panels. All new metal wall panels are to include a minimum 3-foot masonry wainscot. Conventional curb pan or mountable curbing is required for new paved areas or not directly abutting neighboring parking or drive areas. Meet all applicable requirements of the Ashwaubenon site plan review and all other applicable village ordinances. No comments from engineering or stormwater. From public safety, police and fire. All buildings are required to have a Knox key box installed 5 foot from grade and within 5 foot of the front main entrance on the address side of the building. Site plan review committee and plan commission did recommend approval of the request with staff conditions. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
It's a one heck of a big improvement from what it is right now. If you people drive by it, you'll understand. So I'll make I'll make the motion to consider on site plan review request for exterior improvement at 780 Morris Avenue, parcel VA-66-7-E-1.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve the site plan request for exterior improvements to 780 Morris Avenue. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. 11B, consider, discuss, act on appeal of denied operator's license, Lyndsey Petersen, Lyndsey Petersen. Wendy.
Public Safety had recommended denial of the operator's license application due to policy guideline number 1. The Public Works and Protection Committee did recommend approval of the license.
Approval of the license, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Okay, any,
Yeah, we reviewed this at the Public Works and Protection Committee meeting, and we felt that the applicant, Lyndsey here, she came up and explained her situation, and since that time, we're talking way back in 2017, so we're going on 9 years already. She's been a model citizen, has been working in the industry, had no problem since that time, and we just felt that it was appropriate to give her the license and to grant the appeal. So just to move along the discussion, I'll make the motion to grant the appeal of Lyndsey Petersen.
I'll second.
motion and a second to grant the appeal of Lyndsey Petersen for the operator's license. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 11C, consider, discuss, act on the Public Works Superintendent position description, and authorization to proceed with recruitment and hiring of position. Joel?
Thank you. I'm going to probably pass this off, well, I'm not going to probably, I'm going to pass this off to Brian and Megan. As the board is likely aware, we had a unsuccessful recruitment for our Public Works Street Operations Supervisor position earlier in the year as a result of a longstanding employee retirement. As a result of that unsuccessful recruitment and filling of that position, Human Resources and Department Administration and Public Works sat down and talked through job duties, responsibilities, and came up with alternative solutions to try to both fill kind of a very critical position within Public Works, but also establish kind of a better delegation of duties across a multitude of positions, in particular the Public Works Director and their responsibilities related to fleet and facility maintenance, the Operations Supervisor position, and then ultimately what we're hoping to include in next year's operating budget, that of some type of facility program manager. That title has not been determined, but we are crafting this Public Works Superintendent position to ultimately prepare ourselves to allow for the creation of that position and the delegation of those duties, both from Brian's role as Director of Public Works as well as the supervisor position within Public Works as well. This particular item did go through Finance and Personnel earlier in the month and did receive approval from committee. Brian and Megan can certainly talk through more of the details of both the position and recruitment process.
Okay, does anybody have any questions?
No, I sat in on the meeting. I think it's well-deserved for the direction you're going. So, we need a motion on this?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve the, where am I here? Public Works Superintendent position, description and authorization to proceed with the recruitment and hiring of the position.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to adopt the Public Works Superintendent position description and approve the advertising and hiring of the vacated position as requested by the village manager. Any other questions, comments?
One question I do have, and it's more for a future question, Brian, with the new position of facilities, fleet, whatever that turns into, okay, who's gonna report there? And where do those people come from? And this can be a future question, Brian, it's just my comment.
Gotcha. So initially, our plan, we don't really have it formally formalized, but those roles would report to this individual, the Public Works Superintendent, who then directly reports to myself.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 11D, consider, discuss, act on recommended amendments to Village of Ashwaubenon Employee Handbook. Joel.
Thank you, Madam President. In your packet are a summary of several more substantive changes to the employee handbook. As part of our annual review, we look at all elements of the handbook, make minor updates as necessary from time to time. This one's a little bit more substantive because of feedback that we received from employees over the course of the last year, both just in general through employee performance reviews or within our efforts to update the village's strategic plan. And so Megan Knowltner, our Human Resources Generalist, is here, and she is going to walk through some of the more substantive changes. There's about 6 or 7, and then there's no pun there. There's a few changes, 7 or 8 changes in the handbook that we're proposing. And again, these went through committee and were recommended for approval. There are other immaterial changes within the handbook that you probably saw in your packet that really just kind of reallocated designations, such as switching applications are going to be maintained by the village manager. Well, they're really maintained by Human Resources, or there are purchasing policies that have changed over time that never got updated in the handbook as far as the use of purchasing cards versus petty cash and things of that nature. So Megan's going to walk through more of the substantive changes, and then we can certainly piggyback in answering any questions that you have.
All right, so the first proposed changes to section 1.05 are anti-nepotism policy. This looked to clarify and include both seasonal and/or temporary positions as part of this policy. Our prior handbook didn't speak to these employees, and so there wasn't really a policy surrounding these individuals, and they were kind of just left out there. And so to further clarify, we have included them in this anti-nepotism policy. It also further adds that department heads would not be able to have immediate family members working for the village. And ultimately, this is really just to avoid any actual or perceived conflicts of interest in employment decisions or any supervisory relationships. So just looking to promote that fairness amongst employees and really maintain that impartiality. The second one is section 3.04, compensatory time. As you likely are aware, we went through our collective bargaining agreement with our public safety union back in the fall, and as part of that agreement, it was approved to change our compensatory time. They currently are allowed to have up to 480 hours per year, bank those comp time. Over the 3-year period of the contract, we're looking to reduce that number. So the first year will reduce to 400, the second year is 340, and I think the final number is in the 200s. And so part of this change is really just to align with that contract for those public safety supervisors that impacts. The other part of that is just to clarify the practice and how we administer compensatory time. So currently we allow individuals to accrue and have their compensatory time paid out up until that last pay period. And that's further just to clarify so that we're ensuring that the compensatory time is paid out in the year it is earned and not in future years, creating conflict. Section 3.06, on-call stipend. So as you likely recall, we came to board a couple months ago, back in March, and had asked to include our public works field staff in addition to the utility staff that was already part of this policy. So that amendment has been included in this handbook. What we are looking to do is change or increase the on-call stipend. So currently it's $150 for the 7-day period that an individual is on call. We're looking to increase it to $235. And part of the reason that we're looking to increase this is, one, to make it more competitive with the market. So we did pull some comparables amongst other municipalities and determine kind of what that average is. To be honest, they're quite all over the board. So there was maybe one below us, but many of them were far above that $150 that we currently offer our employees. And how we got to that $235 is we took 7 hours and times that by the average earning rate of our field operator. We felt that an hour's worth of work per day is about what we expect them to do, whether it's answer calls, responsiveness to calls or emails, and to issues to be on site. So that's where that $235 comes from. The next section is section 4.14.3, sick leave vacation conversion. So currently, this is applicable to our non-exempt public works and administrative staff, that they are permitted, once they reach their maximum sick leave hours, that they can convert those into vacation hours. What we're looking to do is allow this conversion to our exempt staff, just making it more equitable amongst our employee classifications. Section 5.05.3, equipment purchase and village-owned equipment. So currently we have individuals who have cell phones that are issued by the village. Not everybody. This is based on a per case basis and based on job duties. This is clarifying that in the event an employee retires, they would have the ability to request that phone number be transferred to a personal cell phone. However, that the device itself is not transferable, so that remains with the village. One thing to note is that we retain the ability to not approve the request of the transfer of the number. So if it's just too detrimental to operations, it's a number that it's our on-call number or something, Joel would have that ability to deny the request. Section 5.08.1, dress code. This is to increase our boot allowance from 200 to 300, and it expands on allowing that boot allowance to also be used for the purchase of clothing. This is primarily for our field staff who are required to wear specific equipment out in the field while doing that job. And part of the reason and how we got to that 300 is, again, taking some of those market comparables, what are other municipalities offering their employees, and then looking at the costs of clothing and boots. And then the last section is section 5.15, mileage reimbursement. This is just to clarify some requirements for submitting our mileage reimbursement specific to logs to the finance department, and just noted along with our automobile allowances. Part of that change is that we're making sure it's clarified that those could be considered taxable and WRS reportable income.
And I'll just add to that, so the monetary figures that are proposed in the amended handbook, those would be effective January 1, so they would coincide with the budget year, because obviously we have not budgeted for those changes. I will note that the monetary values for things like on-call stipend or the dress code, those are dollar values that date back from 5 years ago. Those dollar values have not changed in that 5-year period. So we're really essentially trying to keep up to some degree with inflation, but also have some sound and reasonable approach as to what that dollar amount is and why we chose that dollar amount. As Megan had mentioned, similar to the on-call stipend, it's based on kind of that 7-hour average of time we think an individual may end up working during that on-call period.
Okay, does anybody have
All right.
questions?
I'll make a motion to amend the Village of Ashwaubenon Employee Handbook as provided.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to amend the Village of Ashwaubenon Employee Handbook as presented. Any other comments, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed. Motion carried. 11E, consider, discuss, act on a highway safety improvement project grant at the intersection of Shady Lane and Cormier Road. I went, as I told Brian this morning, I went yesterday and I tried to touch base with all of the people on that corner. And the comment, well, 3 of the people were not home, but the one gentleman who was working on his car in the driveway said, "Oh my, that is really needed because this intersection is god-awful. The people just fly through that intersection, and even when the blinky lights are going." So anyway, this is something that's in the future. I told him it's not something that we have gotten, so, but I just wanted them aware of it. So, okay, Brian.
All right, so we're in the very, very preliminary stages of potentially considering this. What I'm presenting to the village board tonight, at the intersection of Shady and Cormier, you guys may be aware, not only have we talked about speeding on Cormier, but there's been a considerable amount of accidents at that intersection over the past 5 years. You'll see in my memo that there were 16 accidents. Of those 16 accidents, 7 of those accidents resulted in injuries. Digging into those accidents a little bit further, they're all referred to as right angle crashes, which are, sometimes referred to as like a T-bone, or a broadside. With that being said, I spoke with the Wisconsin Department of Transportation safety engineer who oversees the HISUP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Program, and kind of just had him talked with him, hey, do you think that this might be a good project to consider doing something here? As he said this intersection is seeing a much higher than normal crash rate compared to similar other intersections within the region. So speaking with him about that, it kind of gave me the feeling that, hey, we probably would be a good applicant for this. In that conversation, I kind of asked him, what would the DOT recommend is the best type of treatment here? Anybody that's been through that intersection, you'll notice when you're on Shady, when you come up to Cormier, Historically, likely there's been troubles there. We've got flashing stop signs. They probably weren't put there because we just had extra money. We probably put them there because there was a problem back when. The problem still is there. With that being said, speaking with the individual from the DOT, he recommended a compact roundabout. There's various compact roundabouts throughout the northeast region of Wisconsin. There's a list attached to the packet here. Some of them are very local. And what it does is it allows for a traffic calming measure, and it also leads to a reduced severity of accidents. So can I say less accidents? No. The severity of the accidents will be less because the vehicles are traveling in a similar route of path. Along with that, the conflict points are far less. So with that being said, there is a HISIP, which is the Highway Safety Improvement Grant that is available that we can apply for. The grant application is due August 15th. Curious what the village board's thoughts are on considering something like this. If we were awarded the grant, it is a 90-10 split. Federal funds are 90%. Local funds, being the village, is 10%. Project would follow the DOT process. So the DOT process is a little bit longer than what we're used to here. If we were to get the funding, the project won't likely occur until 2031 or 2032. So we're out a ways yet. What I'm looking for from the village board is there interest in it? You know, it is a pretty long application. There's a lot of data to collect in order to apply for the application. Or is it something that, you know, we kind of just want to wait and see and hopefully things get better, but one will never know. There is a lot of congestion sometimes at certain times of the day here at that intersection. If you do view that intersection, kind of study it, look at it, it's not so much that people are forgetting to stop, it's people are getting impatient and sometimes just shooting gaps. And they misjudge the speeds of other cars, and they're just, you know, just trying to navigate the intersection, which has proven to be a challenge. So with that being said, I'll open it up to any questions. The one thing I do want to note, I did forget in the memo here, we did have that SS4A, which is a Safe Streets for All. We have not seen the final plan for that, but the draft plan did have this intersection as being a good candidate for a compact roundabout. So a whole third party studied it, Taddy from down in the Milwaukee area, and one of the recommendations for this intersection was a compact roundabout. So we're kind of all speaking the same language. It's just seeing if there is any interest from the village board for us to pursue this any further.
We definitely need to do something with Cormier. People are fast on it. There's a lot of near misses that aren't accidents, and at some point, like you said, something's gonna happen. The only negative to this is we'd have to wait till 2031 to see anything come about. Like, is there any way we can do anything to speed that up a little bit and shrink that out a couple years?
We definitely can. The challenge with that is we wouldn't be eligible for the 90-10 split.
Right.
DOT projects, they previously worked at the DOT. They're very long, very drawn out. There's so many boxes you have to check, so much red tape. You know, it's not like projects that we deliver here. It's like, hey, we talk about it in 2026, we build it in 2027. There's a lot more that goes into it. So we would definitely have to follow the DOT's, you know, timeline, which unfortunately is a 6-year window.
Would we be able to apply for this and then do something temporary, potentially to slow people down at least on Cormier, whether it's something in immediate, I mean, anything, I don't have the answer to that. Or even look at doing something on our own at a different spot to slow Cormier down, because I mean, Pilgrim Way is still a problem as well. You can't hardly get in or out of there at busy times, and I just feel like we could look at doing something more than just this. I mean, for me, if we're gonna apply for this and hope that we get it and we're waiting till 2031, I'd still like to be looking at doing something earlier than that, because I mean, it is a problem.
I do agree with Chris that the issue is the length of it.
Right.
It's just, something needs to be done. Anybody who goes through that intersection, yeah, it's terrible, and there's multiples on Cormier.
Right.
The one question I would have, and this was just more about the skinny roundabout. We have two parks very close in you know, right there. We got one that's 50 feet away, and we got another one that's a block away. Is there pedestrian ways and bicycles? Because roundabouts sometimes create an issue, and you know, more of an issue for pedestrians and bicycles. I just want to make sure that anything that gets done there also is addressing, because there's a lot of kids that are moving back and forth and people walking in those areas.
Yeah, so with a compact roundabout, it does have pedestrian accommodations. The one thing that it does add is it does have a pedestrian refuge island. So anybody that's looking to cross, you should only have to look one direction of travel.
Okay.
You know, get to that, that refuge area, which is kind of, we'll say, a center island before crossing another lane. So rather than crossing 2 lanes of traffic, you're only crossing one at a time, which does leave for kind of a break that generally leads to a safer intersection. May there need to be some sort of educational component, potentially at the school level, in order to educate students how to use it? Absolutely, because we don't have many roundabouts in Ashwaubenon. We don't have any roundabouts in Ashwaubenon. So it's definitely something that we probably should work with the schools to let kids know that this operates very different than in a standard intersection.
I like the idea of applying for the grant and working on other options in the meantime, but let's at least get this process started.
I agree. If we can slow them down closer towards Oneida Street, maybe it'll help out down there. Maybe if we can narrow that median out, I don't know what the answer to that's gonna be, but applying for the grant's a great idea. It's just the weight is the only negative side to that, but it's definitely well worth doing, and I think we can come up with something, so.
And I know my experience at that intersection is the people coming from the west, coming from Packerland,
Yeah.
are the ones that are the worst at that intersection.
Correct.
Not at the ones closer, but at that intersection,
You're-
the ones coming from the west are the ones that are the
You're
worst.
absolutely correct, because I feel like people are slinkying as they come up. There's a gap and somebody comes the corner and speeds up, and you get that where there's just no way through there.
And it's probably because they see Cormier, they got that long stretch coming from Packerland and they can just go. So they
That's
just-
exactly what it is.
They just slowly start speeding up as they're coming in. So, but I, like what Kelly said, I absolutely agree. And, I'll make the motion to direct staff to apply for the Highway Safety Improvement Project Grant at the intersection of Shady Lane and Cormier Road.
I'll second that. And I do think, again, that this is definitely needed, and I do think that we need to look at doing something in another spot temporarily, or even permanent, long-term planning on this road. It's only getting more and more busy as we develop more of that area, like you said, especially if it gets into that opportunity zone, there's gonna be even more and more and more, so.
I know, Brian, you made reference to the other, I forget the name of it, that to slow the traffic down and all that, we've applied for something there. Any idea when that's gonna be coming? An AREA type of thing is what you're looking at, right?
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of what you're referencing.
Well, I thought we were referencing some things where we were gonna try to slow the traffic down with maybe something like they've done on Hazelwood.
Right. We did talk about different traffic calming measures. As for a formal application, I don't know if there is anything.
Okay.
I know Chris had asked, is there some temporary we can do? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can do anything from just putting traffic cones, in the parking lane in order to skinny the lanes up, which makes people get uncomfortable. When you skinny up a road and you put it on a diet, it actually slows people down. It makes people uncomfortable. The challenging thing with that is winter season, we sometimes have to remove that stuff, but at least you can get it out there to try to start slowing people down. You can do, little chicanes, different things that you can do temporarily, just to try to calm traffic. That's something we can definitely look into.
Awesome.
Brian, the bridge going over the pier, they've got that from east to west. And it tells you the speed limit. Are they any useful thing to let the people know, hey, you're speeding?
Yeah, and we do have those. Public safety does have those dynamic message speed signs. They work. I don't know, we did pull traffic data on that segment of Cormier. I can't remember what the 85th percentile was, but I think it was like 31. So it wasn't too, abnormal. If you're up in the 36, 37s and a 25, you got a huge problem. But, if you're under that 7 to 8 miles per hour over the speed limit, it's pretty normal. honestly, when you have a speed limit on a roadway, you generally add about 5 miles per hour as your design speed. So even though it's posted at 25, your design speed's actually 30. So knowing that the 85th percentile was, say, 31, 32, there's nothing too alarming there, but it doesn't make the accidents at the intersection of Shady and Cormier go away. That problem is still there. I know that, especially we're talking a little bit about Pilgrim and Cormier. That's definitely a challenge, especially during school time, especially for kids to navigate that area. We're looking to add some additional signage at that intersection that's in between Pilgrim and 41, because it doesn't fall exactly right at the intersection. It's kind of halfway in between 41 and Pilgrim, just to draw some attention to that crosswalk there.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to direct staff to apply for the grant at the intersection of Shady Lane and Cormier. Any other comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried. Number 12, items for next agenda. If anybody has anything, call the office, stop in the office. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, motion carried.
There you go.